She thought she'd won when she got me demoted. But what she didn't know was that I'd been quietly orchestrating her final promotion, right out the company door, a leading New York tech firm, a scheming colleague and a carefully staged betrayal, and a counterstrike that left the entire office stunned. This is the story of how I turned the person who pushed me down into someone who had to leave the game. In a way she never saw coming, my name is Lauren Mitchell. And for 5 years, I'd poured my soul into Veyron Dynamics. At 35, I'd worked my way up from junior developer to project team lead, believing that hard work and results were all that mattered. How naive I was. Veyron Dynamics occupied 3 gleaming floors in a Manhattan high-rise, all exposed brick and glass walls, the perfect startup turned success story aesthetic. We'd grown from 50 employees to over 500 in just 3 years. The company prided itself on its transparent culture and meritocracy. Buzzwords that looked great on recruiting materials but meant nothing when office politics came into play. I'd always focused on deliverables, clean code, on-time projects, satisfied clients, while others spent their lunch hours schmoozing with executives in the artisanal coffee bar on the 40th floor. I ate at my desk, reviewing sprint plans and debugging issues. I thought excellence spoke for itself. I thought wrong. Enter Sabrina Cole, 32, with perfectly blown-out hair and a wardrobe that probably cost more than my car. She'd joined the company a year after me, but had somehow managed to match my level in half the time. Where I relied on substance, she wielded style. Where I built relationships through trust, she cultivated them through manipulation. At first, I'd admired her confidence. She could walk into any meeting and command attention, spinning average achievements into golden victories. She remembered everyone's birthdays, their kids' names, their favorite sports teams. I'd even considered her a friend. We'd grabbed drinks after work, vented about difficult clients, celebrated project wins together. But I started noticing patterns. Projects she touched would suddenly develop mysterious issues, always traced back to someone else. Team members who challenged her would find themselves reassigned or, worse, let go during restructuring. She had an uncanny ability to be absent when problems arose, but front and center when recognition was handed out. The turning point came during the Morrison Industries integration, a $20 million project that would make or break our department's quarterly targets. As co-leads, Sabrina handled client relations while I managed technical implementation. Everything ran smoothly until the final testing phase, when a critical security flaw emerged in the authentication module, a piece I'd supposedly signed off on. Except I hadn't. The approval email existed, yes, but I'd never sent it. The digital signature was mine. But the metadata told a different story, sent from an IP address I'd never used, at a time when I was in a documented meeting across town. By the time I'd gathered evidence, it was too late. Sabrina had already escalated to the VP of Engineering, framing it as my negligence putting the entire project at risk. The security flaw made us miss our deadline, triggering penalty clauses. Morrison Industries was furious. 2 weeks later, HR called me in for a performance discussion. The outcome was predetermined. I was being demoted to senior project contributor, a fancy title for someone who'd lost their team, their direct reports, and most importantly, their credibility. The twist of the knife? Sabrina was promoted to fill my position, inheriting my team with crocodile tears about how unfortunate the situation was. I should have seen it coming. But I'd been too busy building products to notice someone building my downfall. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, innocent-looking in my inbox between a Jira notification and a lunch invitation. Performance review meeting, 2:05 p.m., HR conference room, B. My stomach dropped. In 5 years at Veyron, I'd never been summoned to HR for anything beyond routine paperwork. At 1:58 p.m., I walked into conference room B to find Janet from HR, my skip-level manager Richard, and, surprisingly, Sabrina, who wore an expression of practiced concern. The security flaw documentation lay spread across the table like evidence at a trial. "Lauren," Richard began, not meeting my eyes. We need to discuss the Morrison Industries situation and its implications for your role here. What followed was 20 minutes of corporate doublespeak that boiled down to a simple message. I was being demoted. The words, lack of attention to detail, failure in leadership judgment, and need for additional oversight blurred together as I sat there, feeling the walls close in. We value your technical contributions, Janet added with rehearsed sympathy, which is why we're offering you a position as senior project contributor under Sabrina's leadership. She's graciously agreed to mentor you through this transition. Mentor me. The woman who'd orchestrated this entire disaster would now be my boss. I looked at Sabrina, who touched my shoulder gently. Lauren, I want you to know I fought for you to stay on the team. We all make mistakes. I'm here to help you grow from this. The performance was Oscar-worthy. I wanted to scream, to throw the fraudulent email evidence in their faces, to demand they check the IP logs. Instead, I heard myself saying, I understand. Thank you for the opportunity to continue contributing. What choice did I have? The tech industry in New York was insular. Getting fired from Veyron would follow me everywhere. I had a mortgage, student loans, aging parents in Florida who depended on my help. I couldn't afford righteous indignation. The real humiliation began the next Monday. Sabrina called a team meeting, my former team, to discuss the transition. She stood where I used to stand, using my presentation template, even borrowing phrases I'd coined. I know change is difficult, she said, her voice dripping with false empathy. But I'm committed to building on the strong foundation Lauren helped establish. She turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Lauren will continue to be a valuable contributor, focusing on what she does best, hands-on technical work. My former direct reports avoided eye contact. Tom, who I'd mentored from intern to senior developer, stared at his laptop. Maria, who I'd recommended for promotion last quarter, fidgeted with her pen. They knew something was off. But what could they do? The weeks that followed were a masterclass in psychological torture. Sabrina assigned me the grunt work, documentation updates, bug fixes, maintenance tasks that junior developers usually handled. She'd publicly praise my attention to detail while privately criticizing everything I produced. Lauren, I noticed you used Oxford commas in the API documentation, she'd say in our one-on-ones. I prefer AP style. Please revise all 40 pages by EOD. She'd schedule meetings during my lunch breaks, forget to invite me to critical planning sessions, then chastise me for being out of the loop. She forwarded my emails to the team with subtle corrections, undermining my expertise with 1,000 tiny cuts. But the worst part was watching her transform into me, or rather, a grotesque imitation. She adopted my morning routine of bringing donuts for the team on Fridays, claimed credit for the automated testing framework I'd built last year, even started using my favorite project management methodologies. It was like watching someone wear my skin. 3 weeks into this new reality, I overheard her on a call with Richard. The team is really responding well to my leadership style, she said. Productivity is up 15% since I implemented my new processes. My processes, my team, my work. That night, I sat in my Brooklyn apartment, staring at my laptop. The smart move would be to update my resume, find another job, leave Veyron and Sabrina behind. But something had shifted inside me. She hadn't just taken my position, she'd tried to erase me, to rewrite history with herself as the hero. I opened a new spreadsheet and created my first column. Sabrina Cole, timeline of events. If she wanted to play dirty, fine. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd left me alive in the organization, close enough to watch, to learn, to wait. The game wasn't over, it had just begun. The mask started slipping by week 6. Sabrina had always been calculating, but power revealed her true nature like alcohol at a company party. The first crack appeared during a sprint planning meeting. Marcus, one of our back-end developers, questioned her proposed timeline for a new feature. Based on our velocity metrics, this seems aggressive, he said carefully. We'd need at least 3 more weeks to... Are you saying you can't handle the workload? Sabrina's voice was silk over steel. Because I'm sure there are plenty of developers who'd love your position. The room went silent. This wasn't the collaborative environment I'd fostered. This was fear. Later that day, I found Marcus in the break room, hands shaking as he poured coffee. She's already put me on a PI, he whispered. Performance improvement plan. For negative attitude. One more strike, and I'm out. Marcus wasn't alone. Over the following weeks, I watched Sabrina systematically break down anyone who challenged her. She weaponized the performance review system, turning constructive feedback into threats. Team morale plummeted. The Friday donut tradition died. People started eating lunch at their desks, afraid to be seen socializing. But Sabrina's real talent lay in managing up. To Richard and the executive team, she was a rising star. Her reports glowed with metrics that told a story of unprecedented success. What they didn't show was how she achieved those numbers. I started documenting everything in my spreadsheet. The way she'd claimed Tom's innovative caching solution as her own architectural vision, how she'd pressure Maria to work unpaid overtime, then report the reduced project costs as efficiency improvements. The times she'd deliberately exclude team members from client communications, then berate them for being uninformed. My breakthrough came through an unlikely source, the janitor, Eddie, who cleaned our floor every evening. "That new boss of yours," he said one night as I worked late. "She's got interesting trash." He discreetly pointed to Sabrina's bin, where shredded papers hadn't been completely destroyed. Among the strips, I could make out fragments of personal emails, printed text messages, even what looked like salary information for team members. She was keeping files on everyone, leverage for future use. The real goldmine came when I befriended Ashley from accounting. We'd grab coffee occasionally, and she'd share her frustrations about discrepancies in project budgets. "It's weird," Ashley confided. "Sabrina's team reports different hours than what I see in the time tracking system. She's billing clients for phantom overtime while burning out her team with unpaid work." I added it to my growing documentation, screenshots, forwarded emails, Slack messages from terrorized team members. But I needed more than evidence. I needed allies. Quietly, I reached out to others who'd suffered under Sabrina's regime, not just from our team, but from her previous positions. The pattern was consistent. Initial charm, gradual isolation of threats, systematic credit theft, and finally, the destruction of anyone who stood in her way. Jake from sales had been her first victim 2 years ago. She sabotaged my presentation to the Goldman Sachs team. He told me over drinks in a bar far from the office, swapped my slides at the last minute, made me look incompetent in front of a $10 million client. Sarah from marketing had a similar story. She spread rumors about my drinking problem, which I don't have, right before the CMO position opened up. I never stood a chance. We formed an informal network, sharing information and watching for patterns. That's when I learned Sabrina's next target, the director of project management position that would open when David retired next quarter. She was already laying groundwork, scheduling strategic sessions with C-suite executives, proposing a complete restructuring of the project management organization. Her vision involved consolidating power under a single leader, herself naturally, with the authority to hire and fire across departments. The irony wasn't lost on me. In her hunger for power, Sabrina was becoming reckless. The higher she climbed, the more visible her manipulations became. She'd started believing her own mythology, convinced she was untouchable. During a particularly brutal team meeting, where she publicly humiliated Tom for a minor code review comment, I saw something shift in the room. The fear was still there, but underneath it, anger was building. People were reaching their breaking point. That night, I stared at my spreadsheet, now dozens of tabs documenting months of abuses, frauds, and violations. I had enough to destroy her, but a direct confrontation would be my word against hers. She'd spin it as the bitter revenge of a demoted employee. No, I needed something cleaner. Something that would let Sabrina destroy herself. As I closed my laptop, a plan began to form. She wanted the director position? Perfect. I'd help her get it, along with enough rope to hang herself. The plan started with a casual comment during Monday's stand-up meeting. Heard Davidson Industries is looking for a new tech partner, I mentioned while updating my tasks. Their CTO was complaining about their current vendor at the FinTech conference last week. I watched Sabrina's eyes light up. Davidson Industries was a whale, a potential $50 million contract that would guarantee her promotion. What she didn't know was that I'd done my homework. Davidson had a reputation for ironclad contracts and zero tolerance for missed deadlines. Interesting, she said, trying to sound disinterested. Do you have any contacts there? My old roommate from MIT works in their procurement department. I lied smoothly. I could make an introduction if you'd like. The hook was set. Over the next 2 weeks, I became Sabrina's most enthusiastic supporter. I stayed late to help prepare her presentation materials, offered strategic insights, even coached her on Davidson's corporate culture. My former team watched in confusion as I seemingly embraced my diminished role. Lauren, I don't get it. Tom cornered me after a meeting. She destroyed your career. Why are you helping her? Sometimes you have to play the long game, I said quietly. Trust me. The introduction to Davidson went perfectly. My roommate was actually a professional contact who owed me a favor. He arranged a meeting between Sabrina and Davidson's procurement team, singing praises about Veyron's capabilities, specifically mentioning our revolutionary rapid deployment methodology. Here's where Sabrina's ego became her weakness. Instead of involving the legal team or technical architects in contract negotiations, she wanted to handle everything personally. She saw it as her chance to prove she didn't need anyone else. I volunteered to review the contract as a second pair of eyes. She accepted, grateful for what she saw as loyalty from a broken subordinate. As I read through the terms, I found exactly what I'd hoped for. Penalty clauses that would trigger at $500,000 per week for delayed delivery. Intellectual property transfers that required director-level sign-off. And most crucially, a personal liability clause hidden in subsection 47B that made the signing project manager financially responsible for certain breaches. This looks standard, I told her, handing back the contract. Similar to our Morrison deal, but with better margins. She didn't read past the revenue projections. The next phase required careful orchestration. I reached out to my network of Sabrina's victims, proposing a synchronized documentation effort. If she was going to take on Davidson, she'd need to pull resources from across the company. We were ready. When Sabrina announced the Davidson project at the all-hands meeting, presenting it as her strategic win, the executive team was thrilled. The contract was signed with fanfare. Sabrina was promoted to acting director of project management, with full confirmation pending successful delivery. That's when the real work began. Sarah from marketing documented every instance where Sabrina demanded priority resources for Davidson at the expense of other clients. Jake from sales kept records of her promising features that weren't in our product roadmap. Ashley from accounting tracked how she was already shifting budget allocations without proper approval. I maintained my helpful facade, even as I watched her make increasingly desperate decisions. The Davidson timeline was aggressive but achievable if everything went perfectly. But in software development, nothing ever does. We need to skip the security audit, Sabrina announced 3 weeks into the project. It's eating up too much time. That's required by our ISO certification. Maria objected. I don't remember asking for opinions. Sabrina snapped, just make it happen. I documented the exchange, adding it to a special folder labeled Davidson Project Decisions. As the deadline approached, the project began to unravel. Features that Sabrina had promised without consulting the technical team proved impossible to implement. The skipped security audit meant we couldn't proceed with deployment. Team members, pushed beyond their limits, started making mistakes. But Sabrina's fatal error came when she tried to cover up the delays. She instructed Tom to falsify test results, ordered Maria to doctor progress reports, and even attempted to access the version control system to backdate code commits. Every single action was documented, screenshots, emails, Slack messages, Git logs. A digital trail of desperation and deception. 2 days before the Davidson deadline, I made an anonymous submission to our corporate compliance hotline. The package included not just the Davidson project irregularities, but months of documented abuses, financial improprieties, and policy violations. As I watched Sabrina frantically trying to salvage the doomed project, I felt no satisfaction, only a cold sense of justice approaching. She'd built her castle on a foundation of others' destruction. Now the tide was coming in. The pieces were in place. All that remained was the fall. The Davidson deadline arrived like a thunderclap on a clear day. At 9 a.m. sharp, their CTO called for a deployment demonstration. Sabrina, wearing her power suit and practiced confidence, led the video conference from our main boardroom. Richard, the VP of Engineering, and several C-suite executives joined to witness what they expected to be another Sabrina Cole triumph. "Let's see this revolutionary rapid deployment in action," Davidson's CTO said, his tone suggesting he'd been burned by vendors before. Tom, pale and exhausted from 3 consecutive all-nighters, initiated the deployment sequence. For 30 seconds, everything looked normal. Then the first error message appeared, then another. Within minutes, the system was throwing critical failures across every module. "I'm sure this is just a minor glitch," Sabrina said, her smile growing brittle. "Tom, can you—" "The security certificates are invalid," Tom interrupted, his voice hollow. "We skipped the audit, remember? The system won't deploy without them." The silence that followed was deafening. Davidson's CTO leaned forward. "You skipped security auditing on a financial services platform?" As Sabrina scrambled for explanations, more problems surfaced. The promised features weren't just buggy, they didn't exist. The progress reports Davidson had been receiving for weeks were fiction. The deployment that should have been seamless was impossible. "Ms. Cole," Davidson's CTO said coldly, "I'll be calling your legal department within the hour. This is gross misrepresentation and breach of contract." The video call ended. Richard turned to Sabrina, his face ashen. "My office. Now." But the dominoes were already falling faster than anyone realized. While Sabrina was being grilled by Richard, the compliance department was processing my anonymous submission. By lunch, a forensic audit team had arrived, dispatched by corporate headquarters. I watched from my desk as they wheeled boxes of documents from Sabrina's office. Her computer was confiscated, the shredded papers Eddie had noticed. Investigators found enough pieces to reconstruct several incriminating documents, including emails where she'd explicitly instructed team members to falsify reports. The team was interviewed one by one. After months of fear and intimidation, the floodgates opened. Tom detailed the forced overtime and threats. Maria explained the falsified test results. Jake provided evidence of client deception going back years. Each testimony added another brick to the wall building around Sabrina. By 3:06 p.m., Ashley from accounting had been called in to explain the budget discrepancies. The phantom overtime billings alone constituted fraud in the high 6 figures. But the real bombshell was the personal liability clause in the Davidson contract, the one Sabrina had signed without reading. "She's personally liable for up to $2 million in damages," Ashley whispered to me during a coffee break. "If Davidson sues, they can go after her personal assets." The investigation revealed a pattern of behavior that went beyond simple ambition. Sabrina had been running what amounted to a systematic extortion scheme, gathering compromising information on colleagues, manipulating performance reviews to eliminate threats, and building her career on the destroyed remains of others. At 4:47 p.m., security arrived at Sabrina's office. She was escorted out carrying only her purse, the same security guards who'd high-fived her that morning now walking her out like a criminal. But the real poetry was in what happened next. An emergency all-hands meeting was called for 5 p.m. The CEO himself, Marcus Wellington, addressed the company. "Today, we discovered systematic violations of our corporate values and legal standards," he began. "Effective immediately. Sabrina Cole's employment has been terminated for cause. We are cooperating fully with law enforcement regarding potential criminal charges. He continued. We failed you as leadership. We rewarded metrics over morality, ambition over integrity. That changes today. The reorganization that followed was swift. The entire performance review system was overhauled. An anonymous ethics hotline was established. And quietly, those who'd been wronged by Sabrina found themselves being approached by HR for career restoration conversations. I was offered my old position back, with a promotion to senior director and a substantial raise for maintaining team stability during a difficult period. They never directly acknowledged what I'd done, but the knowing look from the chief compliance officer said enough. The Davidson lawsuit was settled quietly. Sabrina, facing personal bankruptcy and potential criminal charges, agreed to a plea deal that included industry banishment and restitution payments that would take decades to complete. The last time I saw her was at a Starbucks near the courthouse. She was wearing a simple suit, no more designer labels. Her confident stride had been replaced by hunched shoulders and darting eyes. She saw me, started to approach, then thought better of it. I could have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt empty. Justice isn't always satisfying. Sometimes it's just necessary. The conference room on the 52nd floor had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. It was the kind of room where careers ended, and on that Thursday afternoon, everyone knew why we were there. The attendees filed in with grim faces. Marcus Wellington, CEO. Richard, VP of Engineering. Janet from HR. The Chief Legal Officer, Patricia Chen. 2 representatives from Davidson Industries, and 3 members of the Board of Directors. Sabrina sat at one end of the long table, no longer the confident predator, but cornered prey. I was positioned at the other end, officially there as a witness to project operations. Marcus Wellington didn't waste time with pleasantries. Ms. Cole? We're here to address the Davidson Industries contract breach and the subsequent investigation findings. Davidson's representatives have some questions. Davidson's lead attorney, a silver-haired woman who looked like she ate corporate executives for breakfast, opened a thick folder. Ms. Cole, can you explain why you signed a contract with personal liability clauses without legal review? I believed it was standard language. Sabrina stammered. Similar to our other contracts. Similar to other contracts. The attorney repeated slowly. Yet you instructed your team to skip security audits, falsify progress reports, and misrepresent capabilities. Were these also standard practices? Richard interjected. Our investigation shows systematic deception spanning months. We have documented evidence of... I was under pressure to deliver results. Sabrina interrupted, desperation creeping into her voice. The company culture rewards aggressive timelines, and... Stop! Marcus Wellington's voice was ice. You're suggesting our culture encouraged fraud. Patricia Chen, our chief legal officer, pushed a stack of papers across the table. These are sworn statements from 17 employees detailing threats, intimidation, and coercion. These are falsified timesheets showing billing fraud exceeding $800,000. This is evidence of you accessing our version control system with credentials that weren't yours to alter commit histories. The Davidson attorney leaned forward. Our damages exceed $5 million. The contract you signed makes you personally liable for 40% of that. We're prepared to pursue criminal charges for fraud unless... Unless what? Sabrina's voice cracked. Unless Veyron Dynamics agrees to full cooperation in recovering damages, including termination for cause and industry disclosure. I watched Sabrina's face cycle through emotions, disbelief, anger, bargaining, and finally, the crushing weight of reality. She turned to me suddenly, eyes blazing. This is you, she hissed. You set me up. You knew about the contract terms. You... Ms. Mitchell warned you the contract needed legal review. Patricia interrupted calmly. We have the email trail. You responded, and I quote, I don't need hand-holding from a demoted has-been. The room fell silent. Sabrina's own words, her casual cruelty hung in the air like a noose. Marcus Wellington stood. Ms. Cole, Veyron Dynamics is terminating your employment effective immediately for cause. You'll forfeit all unvested equity, bonuses, and benefits. Security is waiting outside to escort you from the building. You have 1 hour to collect personal items under supervision. Yoy, you can't do this, Sabrina said weakly. I'll sue for wrongful termination. You'll do nothing. The Davidson attorney interrupted. Unless you want us to pursue criminal charges, wire fraud, identity theft, corporate espionage, you're looking at potential federal charges. Your best option is to sign this settlement agreement, accept the termination, and hope we don't push for prosecution. The next 30 minutes were a legal dissection. Every crime, every violation, every breach of trust was laid out in excruciating detail. Board members who'd once praised Sabrina's results now distanced themselves with surgical precision. She was radioactive, and everyone in the room knew it. Finally, with shaking hands, Sabrina signed the settlement agreement, $2 million in personal liability, industry disclosure that would make her unemployable in tech, and a non-disclosure agreement that prevented her from ever discussing the details. As security prepared to escort her out, she stood and looked directly at me. How does it feel, Lauren? You destroyed someone's life. Happy? I met her gaze steadily. I didn't destroy anything. I just made sure the truth came out. You destroyed yourself the day you decided other people were stepping stones. She left without another word, flanked by security guards. Through the glass walls, I watched her final walk through the office she'd terrorized. Developers looked up from their screens. Account managers paused their calls. The entire floor witnessed her fall from grace in real time. Marcus Wellington turned to me after she was gone. Ms. Mitchell, we owe you an apology and a debt of gratitude. I don't need gratitude, I replied. I need a workplace where people like her can't thrive. You'll have it, he promised. And you'll help us build it. We're creating a new position, VP of Culture and Compliance. It's yours if you want it. The meeting concluded with discussions of reform, restoration, and rebuilding, but I barely heard it. I was thinking about Tom, Maria, Jake, Sarah, and all the others who'd suffered in silence. Justice had been served, cold and precise as a surgical strike. I didn't take the VP position, standing in Marcus Wellington's corner office the next morning, watching the sunrise paint Manhattan in shades of gold and amber. I realized I didn't want to be defined by Sabrina's destruction. I'd spent months in the darkness of her shadow, then more months orchestrating her downfall. It was time to step into my own light. I appreciate the offer, I told Marcus, but I need something different. Let me rebuild my team. Launch the innovation lab we talked about 2 years ago. Give me the resources to create something positive. He smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in months. Done. And Lauren? We're implementing your suggestion for anonymous upward reviews. No one should have that much unchecked power again. The weeks that followed were a quiet revolution. Tom returned from stress leave, the dark circles under his eyes finally fading. Maria accepted the senior architect position she'd been denied under Sabrina's reign. Jake in sales landed the Goldman Sachs contract he'd lost 2 years prior. One by one, the scattered pieces of broken careers were gathered and rebuilt. We didn't talk about Sabrina much. There was no victory celebration, no champagne toasts. We simply returned to what we'd always wanted to do: build great technology with people we respected. 3 months later, I ran into Eddie the janitor during another late night at the office. But this time, I wasn't plotting or documenting crimes. I was debugging code with my team. Pizza boxes scattered around, laughter echoing through the workspace. Different energy up here now, Eddie observed, emptying the recycling bins. Feels like people can breathe again. He was right. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted like fog burning off in sunlight. People collaborated instead of competed. Ideas flowed freely without fear of theft. The Friday donut tradition returned. But now it rotated. Everyone wanted to contribute to the team's joy. I heard about Sabrina only once more, 6 months later. Ashley from accounting mentioned seeing her at a coffee shop, working on a laptop covered in freelance platform stickers. The woman who'd once commanded a corner office was now bidding for contract work. Her reputation in corporate tech permanently destroyed. The industry disclosure had worked. Every major company knew her name and what she'd done. Did I feel guilty? No. She'd made her choices, stepping on others to climb higher, never considering that her victims might one day stand up. But I didn't feel triumphant either. There's no joy in watching someone fall, even when they tied the rope themselves. A year later, Veyron Dynamics was featured in Tech Weekly's Best Places to Work issue. The article highlighted our revolutionary approach to workplace culture, transparent performance reviews, protected whistleblower channels, and what they called radical accountability. They never mentioned the scandal that sparked these changes: history, sanitized for public consumption. My team's innovation lab launched 3 successful products that year. We patented new technologies, mentored junior developers, and built something that mattered. The work felt clean, honest, meaningful. Everything it hadn't been under Sabrina's shadow. Sometimes, late at night when the office is quiet and the city lights twinkle below, I think about the cost of justice, the months of documentation, the careful orchestration, the emotional toll of playing a role while watching others suffer. Was it worth it? Then I see Tom mentoring a new hire without fear of being undermined. I watch Maria present her ideas confidently, knowing they won't be stolen. I observe Jake closing deals without worrying about sabotage. And I know the answer. Evil thrives when good people do nothing. Sabrina had counted on our silence, our fear, our isolation. She'd built her empire on the assumption that her victims would never unite, never fight back, never find the courage to expose her. She was wrong. The woman who thought she'd won when she got me demoted learned a harsh truth. Power built on others' destruction is as fragile as a house of cards. One breath of truth, and it all comes tumbling down. These days, when young employees ask me for career advice, I tell them this: work hard, but watch harder. Document everything. Build alliances, not just networks. And never ever let anyone make you feel powerless in your own story. Because sometimes, the best promotion you can give someone is a one-way ticket out the door. She got me demoted. I got her promoted, right out of the company, out of the industry, out of our lives forever. And that, I've learned, is the sweetest justice of all. Thank you for listening to my story. I'm curious, where are you listening to this tale of workplace justice? Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your own thoughts or experiences. Sometimes the best revenge stories are the ones where truth wins in the end.